There is a type of child who goes mostly unnoticed, not because they're invisible, but because they've made themselves easy to overlook. They don't cause problems. They don't demand attention. They handle things. Adults describe them as mature, responsible, and old souls. And in the moment, it reads as a compliment. What nobody says out loud, what often nobody even thinks, is that a child who has stopped needing things didn't stop because they grew. They stopped because the environment taught them that needing things was a problem they were creating for someone else. What looks like exceptional maturity from the outside is often something else entirely on the inside. Picture a kitchen on a weeknight. A child, maybe 9 years old, standing at the stove. Not because someone asked them to be there, because someone needed to be, and they were the one available. They've learned which burner runs hot. They've learned that their younger sibling won't eat vegetables unless they're cut small. They've learned, without anyone explaining it, that this is now their job. They are 9 years old, and they already know what it means to be responsible for someone else. Sometimes it happens at the stove. Sometimes it's becoming the translator between parents whose arguments required a child to stand in the middle. Sometimes it's learning to read the room to sense the emotional weather before walking through the door, before they'd learned to read chapter books. It doesn't always look dramatic. It's often quiet, functional, almost invisible. But that version of that child didn't disappear. It became the operating system. Psychologists call the formal version of this parentification, when a child takes on roles and responsibilities that belong to adults. But that clinical term doesn't quite reach it. It doesn't capture the weight of being small and holding up something so much larger than you. Dr. Lisa M. Hooper, whose research on parentification spans decades, found that these children develop what appears to be exceptional maturity. The crucial word appears. What is actually happening is a survival adaptation, a child's nervous system learning to run in crisis mode, not as an exception, but as its permanent default setting. What felt normal to that child was, by any measure, someone else's crisis. And the adaptation works. These children become extraordinarily skilled at reading other people's emotions, sensing a parent's mood before a word is spoken, from the sound of keys in the lock. They learn to anticipate needs before they're voiced. Problem solving becomes not a skill, but a reflex, because in their specific environment, failing to solve the problem meant something that felt genuinely dangerous. These are real capacities. They serve these people throughout their lives. The price tag just doesn't arrive until much later. If this is landing somewhere true, if you're recognizing a childhood that you've never quite had words for, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find this conversation. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology beneath how people were shaped, subscribe. This is exactly what we do here. Here is the inversion that most people never expect. Children who grew up too fast often handle the large challenges of adult life with relative ease. The crises, the genuine emergencies, they navigate these almost automatically. It's the small things that break them open. Asking for help, resting without guilt, being genuinely carefree without the background hum of something that needs managing. These feel not just uncomfortable, but dangerous, in a way that doesn't fully respond to logic. Because when you learned early that the world doesn't stop for your needs, that stability depends entirely on your ability to hold it together, you didn't just learn a lesson. You built an entire operating system around it. Every reflex, every default response, every way of walking into a room and immediately assessing what it requires from you. That system is still running. In adulthood, this takes on shapes that feel personal, but are actually architectural. You become the one others rely on in a crisis, the reliable one, the one who just handles things. You find yourself drawn to people who need something from you, because being needed is the version of love your nervous system learned to recognize. Receiving consistent care, someone simply asking how you are, and waiting for the real answer can feel oddly wrong, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because home was a place where you gave endlessly, and receiving was rare. Consistent love doesn't feel like safety. It feels like a pattern you don't know how to trust yet. The need for control that develops isn't toxic in its origin. It's a deep, primal need to manage every variable because unpredictability once genuinely meant danger. You plan. You run through scenarios. You anticipate problems that haven't formed yet. People call it type A, or anxious, or perfectionist. What they're actually seeing is a child who learned that letting their guard down had real consequences, and who built an entire adult life around never letting that happen again. There is a tiredness that comes with all of this that deserves to be named accurately. A bone-deep exhaustion that sleep doesn't reach. Not laziness, not a weakness. What happens when a nervous system has been in overdrive since elementary school? The body never learned what genuine rest feels like because rest wasn't classified as safe. Rest, in that childhood, meant things might fall apart. The body recorded that and still responds accordingly. And then there's the success that never quite settles. These people achieve genuinely impressive things and find a voice that keeps moving the finish line. More, better, faster, prove it again. Because their worth got tangled with their usefulness so early that no achievement has ever felt sufficient to close that gap. The world, cruelly, rewards this. Society loves people who grew up too fast, productive, independent, low maintenance, gets things done. Nobody asks what it costs to become this way. What also develops, and this is what slowly empties people out, is fluency in a language most people never have to learn. The language of emotional labor. Managing a room full of tension like a conductor leading an orchestra. Diffusing conflict before it starts, because you learned to spot it while it was still forming. Making everyone else comfortable while you're drowning quietly inside. It becomes automatic, like breathing. Except, this slowly drains the thing that makes life feel worth living. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel utterly alone. Not lonely in the obvious sense, but alone in the specific sense that nobody sees how hard you are working, and asking them to notice feels like admitting you failed at the one thing you were supposed to be good at. How do you heal from something you're not even sure counts as trauma? It wasn't one event. It was 1,000 small moments of being too much and not enough at the same time. You start by grieving not dramatically, but honestly. Grieving the childhood that didn't happen. The version of you who could have been messy and needy and irresponsible and still been loved. That child deserved that. Saying so doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you accurate. Then comes the harder work of separating two things that got fused together very early. Being needed and being valued. They are not the same thing. Your worth was never measured by what you could produce or how well you managed the emotions of the people around you. You are not a human being. You are a human being, and being simply existing, without output, without function, is enough. It always was. You are allowed to rest, allowed to be the one who falls apart occasionally, allowed to receive without earning it first. You are, in the most honest sense, a beginner at being taken care of. The fact that you're 30 or 40 or 50 doesn't change that this is still new territory. Be patient with yourself in ways that were never available to you then. The child who held everything together at 9, resourceful, strong, brave beyond anything a child should have to be, did an extraordinary job. They don't have to run the show anymore. They didn't become strong despite what happened. They became strong because they had no other choice. And the same person, decades later, is allowed to set that weight down now. Not because they finally earned the rest. Because they deserved it from the very beginning. Did you grow up feeling responsible for more than a child should ever have to carry? Leave it in the comments. You might find you're not nearly as alone in that as you've always believed. Thank you for watching.